Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to feel embarrassed later? It was a warm afternoon in a small, quiet neighborhood where most people knew each other by name. The sun was shining, and a group of young office workers stood outside their company building, taking a short break from work. They were laughing, joking, and checking their phones when an old delivery van pulled into the parking lot. The van looked worn out, its paint chipped and its tires dusty. When the driver stepped out, some of the workers exchanged smirks. He was a tall black man, wearing a simple hoodie, jeans, and old sneakers. He carried a few brown boxes, stacked carefully in his arms. He nodded at the group politely, but instead of greeting him back, they whispered and chuckled among themselves. "Must be lost," one of them said under his breath. "Or bringing sandwiches," another choked, and they all laughed a little louder. The delivery man, whose name was Marcus, kept walking without reacting. He had been through moments like this before, and he knew better than to waste his energy on small minds. He moved steadily toward the building entrance, balancing the boxes with ease. The workers didn't bother hiding their amusement. They had already decided who Marcus was, just by looking at him. Inside the building, the receptionist looked up from her desk. She hesitated for a moment when she saw Marcus, but then she smiled politely. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here for the conference room," Marcus said calmly. He placed one of the boxes on the counter and pulled a small badge from his back pocket. The badge wasn't from any delivery company. It was an official guest pass, signed by the company's CEO himself. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly when she saw the pass. She quickly stood up and pointed him toward the conference room at the end of the hallway. "Right this way, sir," she said, her voice a little more respectful now. Marcus nodded and walked down the hall. The workers outside kept laughing, still completely unaware of what was happening inside. They thought they had seen the whole story, but they had only seen the cover of the book. The conference room was quiet and large, with neat rows of chairs and a big screen at the front. Marcus set the boxes down carefully and started unpacking them. Inside the boxes were folders, notebooks, and some small devices, tools he would use for the special session he was about to lead. He glanced at his watch. It was almost time. Soon, the same people who laughed at him would be sitting here, listening to him speak. But Marcus wasn't here to prove anyone wrong. He was here to share something important, something that could change the way they saw the world and themselves. And outside, the sun kept shining, as if it already knew that a lesson was about to unfold that no one would forget. Outside, the group of workers stayed by the entrance, still making quiet jokes and sharing knowing glances. They thought the delivery man had dropped off some supplies and would leave soon. None of them gave a second thought to who he really was or why he was there. Inside the building, Marcus moved with purpose. After setting up the materials, he stood by the large screen and looked around the empty room. He remembered a time not so long ago when he would have been too nervous to stand in front of a crowd. But life had taught him many lessons, and now he was ready to teach a few himself. A few minutes later, the company's CEO walked in. He was a tall man in a neat suit, smiling warmly when he saw Marcus. They shook hands like old friends. "Thank you for coming," the CEO said. "Glad to be here," Marcus replied. The CEO turned to his assistant and said, "Call everyone in. It's time." The assistant quickly went outside and waved the workers inside. They tossed away their coffee cups, brushed off their clothes, and strolled into the building. Some of them still wore amused looks, expecting a boring speech or maybe a sales pitch. None of them expected the man they had laughed at to be standing at the front of the room. As they entered the conference room, a few workers slowed down. Their eyes widened. The smirks faded. There, standing tall and confident, was the man from the delivery van, the one they had made fun of just minutes ago. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. "Wait, is that the same guy? What's going on?" They took their seats, unsure of what to expect. The room fell into a strange, uncomfortable silence. Everyone could feel it, the heavy weight of misunderstanding. Marcus waited until everyone had settled. He picked up a small remote and clicked it, and the big screen behind him lit up. It showed a photo of him at a major tech conference, standing on a big stage, giving a keynote speech. The caption below read, "Marcus Taylor, founder and CEO of TechRise Solutions." A few workers gasped softly. Marcus smiled calmly and spoke. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcus Taylor. Some of you might have seen me arrive earlier. I noticed a few last. And that's okay. I'm not here to call anyone out. I'm here to talk about something we all deal with, the danger of first impressions. He paused, letting the words sink in. You see, I grew up in a small town with very little money. People judged me by my clothes, my old car, and the way I talked. They didn't see the hard work or the dreams. They only saw what was on the outside. And today, I want to share how I turned all of that into a journey that changed my life. The room stayed silent. Every worker sat still, their full attention on Marcus. They knew this was not just another boring talk. This was something real, something they needed to hear. Marcus clicked the remote again and another picture appeared on the screen. It showed a small, crowded apartment filled with old computers and wires. This, he said, pointing to the photo, was my first office. It was just a corner in my apartment. I fixed broken computers for people in my neighborhood. Sometimes I didn't even get paid. But I loved learning, and I loved solving problems. The workers leaned in a little closer. The man they had laughed at had already lived a life far different from what they imagined. Marcus continued, I didn't have much money. I didn't have fancy tools or a team to help me. But I had one thing that kept me going, belief. Belief that if I worked hard, treated people with respect, and stayed focused, things would change. The next slide showed a picture of a small shop. After 2 years, Marcus said, I saved enough to open my first repair shop. It wasn't much, just a tiny place on a busy street. Most days, I worked from sunrise to late at night. I fixed everything from computers to old radios. Sometimes I made mistakes. Sometimes I wanted to give up, but I didn't. He looked around the room. Many workers were now nodding slowly, understanding his journey more clearly. People judged me back then too, Marcus said with a small smile. Some thought I would never succeed. Others laughed when they saw my tiny shop. But every time someone said I couldn't do it, I worked harder. He clicked the remote again. Now the screen showed Marcus standing proudly in front of a large modern building. This is TechRise Solutions today, he said. A company with more than 300 employees. We create software that helps small businesses grow. And it all started with an old laptop and a dream. The room stayed silent, heavy with respect. I didn't come here today to show off, Marcus added, his voice steady and kind. I came here to remind you, greatness doesn't always look the way you expect it to. It doesn't come wearing expensive suits or driving brand new cars. Sometimes it comes in old sneakers and a dusty van. He paused, letting his words sink deep into their minds. Every person you meet has a story. Every person you pass by could be carrying dreams bigger than you can imagine. Don't let a first glance fool you. One of the workers shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Another looked down, embarrassed. It was clear that the message had touched them. Marcus smiled again, not in anger, but with warmth. Now, he said, let's talk about how we can build a better future. One where we see each other for who we are, not just what we look like. The workers sat straighter in their chairs, ready to listen, ready to learn. Something had already changed inside them, and the real lesson was just getting started. Marcus stood at the front of the room, feeling the heavy silence that filled the air. But it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that happens when people are truly listening, thinking about every word. He walked slowly across the stage, speaking in a calm and steady voice. Success is not about where you start, Marcus said. It is about how much heart you put into your journey. When I first began, no one believed in me. Some days, even I found it hard to believe in myself. But every morning, I reminded myself that hard work, kindness, and patience would take me further than doubt ever could. He stopped and looked around the room. I met a lot of closed doors. I heard a lot of no along the way. Many people laughed at me. They told me I was wasting my time, that someone like me could never build something big. And I could have listened to them. I could have given up, but I didn't. Marcus clicked the remote again, and this time a short video played on the screen. It showed clips of his employees working at TechRise Solutions. Some were designing new apps. Others were helping customers. The workers in the room watched in amazement. These people, Marcus said, pointing at the video, they come from all walks of life. Some are college graduates, some never finished school, Some had been turned away from jobs before because of how they looked or where they came from. But at TechRise, we look for heart, not just a perfect resume. He paused and let the video finish. I believe that when you give people a real chance, when you see beyond the surface, they can do incredible things, Marcus said with a smile. Then he leaned in a little, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. I didn't drive an old van today to make a point, he said. It's just the same van I used when I started. I keep it to remind myself and my team that beginnings matter, the struggles, the hard days, the small victories, that all matter. A few workers smiled, understanding something deep and important for the first time. Marcus straightened up and looked across the room. And remember, he added, if you ever think you are too small to make a difference, just think about a single spark. One small spark can start a great fire. There was a quiet moment as everyone thought about his words. A soft breeze from an open window stirred the papers on the tables. It felt almost like the room itself was breathing in new energy, new ideas. Then Marcus chuckled gently and said, also, if you're finding these stories inspiring and you want more real-life lessons like this, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us for the journey ahead. The workers laughed softly, and the room felt lighter, full of hope and respect. Outside the conference room, the sun had moved lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Inside, the workers sat quietly, waiting to hear more from Marcus. The energy in the room had completely changed. It was no longer full of casual laughter and light jokes. It was filled with respect and a deep desire to learn. Marcus smiled kindly at the crowd. He could see that they were ready for the next part of the lesson. Now Marcus said, let's talk about how first impressions can shape not just one moment, but a whole future. He picked up a marker and walked to a large whiteboard. He drew two simple circles. In one circle, he said, is judgment, quick thoughts, fast opinions. We all have them. It's natural. But if we let them guide our actions, we miss out. We miss out on good friends, strong teammates, brilliant ideas. He pointed to the second circle. In this circle is understanding, patience, curiosity. When we take the time to really see people, to really listen, we find stories and skills that we never expected. The workers nodded, following every word. I want you to think about someone you judged too quickly, Marcus continued. Someone you decided was not smart enough, not good enough, just because of what you saw on the outside. How would your life look today if you had given them a real chance? The room grew even quieter. Some workers looked at their hands. Others stared at the whiteboard, lost in thought. Marcus clicked the remote again and a new slide appeared. This time it was a picture of a man in a janitor's uniform standing proudly beside a computer. This man, Marcus said, worked as a cleaner in one of my old offices. He was quiet, and most people ignored him. But one day I noticed he was fixing a broken computer during his break. Not just plugging it in, actually fixing it. The workers leaned in, curious. I talked to him, learned that he had studied computer science before he had to leave school to support his family. No one had ever asked him about his skills before. They only saw the uniform. Today, he's one of my lead engineers. A few workers gasped quietly. The story touched them more than any lecture ever could. Greatness, Marcus said, can wear many different uniforms. It can drive old vans. It can walk into a room without anyone noticing. But it's still greatness. And if you are smart enough to see it, it will change your life. He placed the marker down and stepped back. The workers looked at each other, seeing their own mistakes reflected back at them. They realized how many chances they might have missed, how many people they had misjudged. And for the first time that day, they didn't feel like laughing. They felt like learning. Learning to see the world and the people in it with new, wiser eyes. The workers sat quietly, thinking about Marcus's words. The room no longer felt like just a place for a meeting. It felt like a classroom for life lessons. Every person there knew they had learned something important, something they would not forget. Marcus gave them a few moments to think. Then he spoke again, his voice even softer. I want to leave you with a challenge, he said. The next time you meet someone, whether they are wearing a suit or carrying a box, stop and think. Ask yourself, what story am I not seeing? He walked slowly across the front of the room. Your kindness, Marcus continued, might be the difference between someone giving up and someone reaching their dreams. Your open mind might be the reason someone discovers their true strength. He paused and smiled warmly. And who knows, he added, maybe that person will be the one to change your life someday. The workers looked around the room, seeing their co-workers with fresh eyes. It was a strange feeling, like they were meeting everyone again for the first time. One worker, a young man with glasses, raised his hand nervously. "Mr. Taylor," he said, "how did you stay strong when people judged you unfairly? Did it ever make you angry?" Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Of course," he said, "I am human too. There were days when I felt hurt, but I realized that anger would only slow me down. If I let their judgment control me, I would never reach my goals. So instead, I used their doubts as fuel. Every time someone laughed at me, I worked harder. Every time someone told me I couldn't, I learned more." He pointed gently at the young man. "Remember," Marcus said, "their small minds have nothing to do with your big dreams." The young man smiled, feeling braver somehow. Marcus clicked the remote one last time. The screen showed a simple quote: "Judge less, love more, believe always." He looked at the workers and said, "This is the heart of everything I learned. This is what built TechRise Solutions, and this is what can build your future too." The workers clapped, not loudly, but warmly. It was the kind of applause that came from true respect, not just politeness. Marcus thanked them and started packing up his things. But before he could leave, the CEO of the company stood up. "Marcus," the CEO said, "thank you for reminding us of something we all sometimes forget. That greatness has no single face, no single color, and no single style." The workers clapped again, a little louder this time. As Marcus walked out of the conference room, the same workers who had laughed at him earlier now lined up to shake his hand, thanking him for his powerful message. And outside, the old delivery van still waited, a simple reminder that true value is never parked in appearances. It is driven by heart, effort, and vision. As Marcus stepped out into the afternoon sun, he felt a soft breeze against his face. The workers followed him outside, talking quietly among themselves. The laughter that had once been full of jokes was now filled with admiration and respect. Marcus placed his bag carefully inside the old van. He turned around and saw the workers gathering near the entrance, watching him. Some of them still looked a little embarrassed, but most wore small smiles, like they had learned something they would carry with them for a long time. One of the older workers, a man with gray hair and rough hands, walked up to Marcus. "I want to apologize," the man said, his voice low. "We judged you too quickly. It won't happen again." Marcus shook his hand firmly and said, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Soon, a few more workers joined in, offering their thanks and apologies. It was not forced. It was real. Every handshake, every nod, carried a weight of sincerity. The CEO, standing nearby, spoke to this team. "Let today be a turning point," he said, "not just in how we see visitors, but in how we treat each other every single day. Respect is not given because of clothes or titles. Respect is given because every person deserves it." The workers nodded. They knew this lesson was about much more than just one man with a van. It was about the kind of workplace they wanted to build. It was about the kind of people they wanted to be. Marcus gave one last wave and climbed into his van. The engine rumbled to life with a soft growl. As he drove away, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw the workers standing together, watching him leave. They were no longer laughing at him. They were thinking, growing, and changing. Inside the conference room, the young man with glasses picked up a notebook and wrote something at the top of the page. "See beyond the surface." He underlined it twice. Others stayed back to talk in small groups, sharing stories about times they had judged too quickly or been judged themselves. For the first time, they understood how much harm a quick laugh or a careless comment could cause. The CEO smiled as he listened to the conversations. He knew that something important had happened today, something that no training manual could ever teach. Sometimes it takes just one moment, one story, or one unexpected meeting to open eyes and change hearts. And today, that moment had come riding in an old van, wearing simple clothes, carrying a message that would last a lifetime. The sun began to set, painting the sky in soft oranges and blues. It was the end of the day, but for everyone there, It felt like the beginning of something new, a better way of seeing the world and the people around them. Weeks passed after Marcus's visit, but the memory of that day stayed fresh in everyone's mind. The workers were different now. They greeted every delivery driver with a smile. They listened more carefully to each other during meetings. They asked questions before making judgments. Something deeper had changed, not just how they treated Marcus, but how they treated everyone. The young man with glasses, who had asked Marcus a question that day, found new confidence. He started leading small team projects and encouraging others to share ideas. The older worker with gray hair became known for his kindness, always taking time to welcome new employees and show them around. The CEO, too, made changes. He invited speakers from different backgrounds to share their stories every month. He reminded his team often, greatness is not always obvious. We must look closer, listen harder, and believe in each other. One afternoon, a new worker arrived. He was quiet, dressed plainly, and drove an old car that rattled loudly in the parking lot. A few people glanced at him when he entered the building, but this time, no one laughed. Instead, they walked over, shook his hand, and welcomed him warmly. They had learned their lesson well. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his work at TechRise Solutions. He often thought back to that day at the company. He smiled, knowing that real change had taken root. His old van still sat proudly in the TechRise parking lot, a symbol of everything he had been through and everything he believed. Marcus also continued speaking at different companies, schools, and community centers. He shared his story, not to gain fame, but to remind people that every person has value. Every person deserves a chance to be seen, heard, and respected. One evening, after a long day of work, Marcus stood by his van and watched the sunset. The sky was full of soft golds and purples. He thought about how many times people had laughed at him, how many doors had been closed in his face. And yet he was still standing, still driving his old van, still believing in the power of kindness, hard work, and open hearts. He pulled out a small notebook from his pocket. Inside, he had written words he lived by. Your value is not in what others see. Your value is in what you build, what you share, and how you lift others along the way. Marcus smiled, closed the notebook, and placed it carefully on the seat next to him. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, he started the engine. The old van rumbled to life, carrying him forward into new adventures, new lessons, and new chances to change the world, one heart at a time. And somewhere in a quiet office building, a group of workers would always remember the day they laughed at a delivery man, and how that same man changed their lives forever.